March 27th, 1945. In a shell-cratered field near Wissel, Corporal Jamie Bennett pressed his boot against a trembling German soldier's chest and felt something that made his gut twist. Not resistance, desperation. The kid couldn't have been more than 17, hands raised, lips moving in broken English, trying to say something that kept getting lost in panic. Jamie's patrol had orders to secure prisoners quickly and move forward. Rhine crossing operations were behind schedule. 15 British soldiers needed to advance 3 miles through contested territory before nightfall. What they didn't need was a terrified teenager slowing them down. But the boy kept pointing at the ground, at the mud, scratching something with his finger that looked like lines, circles, symbols. Jamie raised his rifle to hurry the kid along, then stopped. Those weren't random scratches. Those were coordinates, mine locations. A map of the exact route Jamie's patrol was about to take, and every X marked a Teller mine buried 6 inches deep, waiting to blow them into pieces small enough to mail home. Jamie had been ordered never to trust enemy intelligence without verification. But his patrol was moving in 8 minutes, and verification took hours they didn't have. This is the story of how one British corporal believed a captured child soldier, and why both armies tried to bury what happened next. Before we go further, if you love untold stories of forbidden battlefield trust, hit that subscribe button. You won't find these stories anywhere else. Jamie Bennett wasn't supposed to be taking prisoners. The British Second Army had strict protocols about forward reconnaissance operations. Corporals maintained tactical momentum. They secured objectives quickly. They passed captured enemy personnel to rear echelon units. What they did not do was conduct extended interrogations or accept tactical intelligence from unverified sources in active combat zones. The reasons were practical. First, forward units lacked resources for proper prisoner processing. Second, accepting enemy intelligence invited deception and ambush. Third, and most critically, it encouraged soldiers to trust information from sources that had every motivation to mislead, potentially compromising entire operations. But Jamie had never been comfortable with protocols that treated all Germans as equally dangerous. He'd grown up in Yorkshire, the son of a coal mine foreman who taught him to read ground before reading maps. His father worked Kellingley Colliery, a place where knowing geology meant the difference between profitable dig and catastrophic collapse. Jamie learned observation at his father's side, absorbing not just techniques, but the philosophy behind them. You didn't just follow survey charts blindly, you watched, you tested, you understood that every seam had its own language. Every rock formation told a story about what lay beneath. By the time he enlisted in 1942, Jamie could assess ground stability by looking at surface patterns, predict underground hazards from topsoil composition, identify danger before it became disaster. The army tested his observational skills during basic training. They marked him excellent and assigned him to combat engineering. But instead of sending him to a mine clearance unit where his knowledge would be invaluable, some administrative confusion landed him with the 15th Scottish Division as a patrol leader. He led reconnaissance teams. He assessed terrain. He spent most of his time cold, exhausted, and moving through ground that reminded him too much of Yorkshire mine country until the Rhine crossing. When Montgomery launched Operation Plunder on March 23rd, British forces pushed across the Rhine in the largest river assault since D-Day. Entire bridgeheads formed. German resistance fractured into desperate pockets. In the chaos, Jamie found himself leading a 15-man patrol through unfamiliar territory with orders to secure a forward observation position 3 miles east of Wissel. The ground worried him immediately. Too flat, too uniform. Perfect for vehicle movement, which meant perfect for defensive mining. German engineers were famous for their efficiency. If they'd been forced to abandon this sector, they wouldn't have left it undefended. They'd have planted obstacles, turned the ground itself into a weapon. Jamie started watching. At first, it was just survival instinct. He'd mark disturbed soil, Unusual drainage patterns. Anything that suggested recent digging. Nothing definitive, just general caution about moving through ground that felt wrong. But Jamie had a gift. Not for observation, though that helped. He had a gift for reading Earth. Before the war, he'd worked alongside his father, learning to interpret what ground was saying. Disturbed soil had characteristics. Fresh digging left signatures in vegetation patterns, drainage flow, surface texture. He could see problems forming before they became catastrophic. Now, leading a patrol through German-held territory with time pressure mounting, Jamie began to see patterns again. There was a section of field that looked too perfect. Grass that grew slightly different from surrounding areas. Subtle depressions that suggested soil had been removed, then replaced. Small indicators that engineers had worked this ground recently. Jamie started taking mental notes. He'd mark suspicious areas, sketch crude maps in his mind, plan routes that avoided the most obvious danger zones. Within 2 hours of entering the sector, he could identify probable mine locations by ground patterns alone. He knew German engineers were methodical. He knew their protocols favoured systematic placement. He knew they'd mine the most tactically valuable routes first. On the third hour, March 27th, Jamie's patrol encountered something that made him call for halt. A German soldier, alone, unarmed, emerging from a destroyed farmhouse with hands raised. Not running, not fighting, just surrendering. Jamie's training said secure the prisoner, pass him back, continue mission. But something about the boy made Jamie hesitate. He couldn't have been more than 17, baby-faced, terrified, wearing a uniform 3 sizes too large. Not a soldier, a child pressed into service during Germany's desperate final months. The boy was speaking rapidly in German, gesturing toward the ground, trying to communicate something Jamie's limited German couldn't quite catch. One of Jamie's men stepped forward to bind the prisoner's hands, but the boy pulled away, dropped to his knees, and started drawing in the mud. Lines. Circles. X marks. A crude map showing the field ahead, marked with symbols Jamie recognized from engineering manuals, mine locations. Jamie's patrol stared at the drawing. 15 British soldiers looking at a teenager's mud map that allegedly showed where death was buried, wondering if this was intelligence or deception, salvation or trap. Jamie needed to make a decision that would determine whether his patrol lived or died, because sometimes the only way to survive enemy ground is to trust an enemy who knows where he planted the mines. Jamie had been reading ground for 20 years, and the boy's map matched everything Jamie's instincts were screaming about the field ahead. The mine locations aligned with tactical logic. They covered the most direct routes. They protected approaches to the destroyed farmhouse. They followed German engineering doctrine exactly as Jamie understood it. But understanding doctrine and trusting a terrified teenager were different calculations. The boy sat in the mud, hands shaking, looking between Jamie and the map he'd drawn, repeating one phrase over and over. Minen. Viele Minen. Alle hier. Mines. Many mines. All here. Jamie's sergeant, a Scotsman named MacLeod, crouched beside him. Could be legitimate intelligence. Could be leading us straight into ambush. Germans have used prisoner deception before. They have. Jamie studied the boy's face. Fear wasn't fakeable. Not at this intensity. The kid was genuinely terrified. But of what? British capture? German officers who'd punished him for surrendering? Or was he terrified his deception would fail, said Sum. Understanding the boy's psychology wasn't just academic curiosity. Jamie had realized something crucial about teenage soldiers in Wehrmacht service, or rather, the desperation that created them. By March 1945, Germany was conscripting children. 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, boys who'd been in Hitler Youth 1 month and frontline trenches the next. These weren't ideological fanatics. They were terrified children forced into uniforms, given rifles they barely knew how to fire, and abandoned by officers who fled at first contact with Allied forces. This boy fit that pattern perfectly. Too young, too scared, too eager to surrender. He hadn't fought, hadn't resisted, just walked out with hands raised, seeking capture, possibly safety. But that desperation made him either the most reliable intelligence source or the most dangerous liar. A boy desperate to survive might tell truth to prove value to captors, or a boy desperate to survive might lie perfectly to avoid execution for cowardice by German officers watching from concealed positions. Jamie had filled his mind with observations about the boy. The way he'd drawn the map matched someone with engineering knowledge, not combat training. His hands had calluses consistent with digging, not rifle handling. His uniform was marked with engineering corps insignia, barely visible under mud and wear. These were details that suggested authenticity. More importantly, Jamie had identified emotional patterns. The boy was confident when pointing at mine locations. He became hesitant when Jamie's men moved toward him aggressively, and he was absolutely desperate to make them understand. Every time Jamie seemed to dismiss the map, the boy would add more detail. Another X mark, another measurement, more precision. That desperation to be believed felt authentic. Liars simplified. Truth-tellers complicated, adding details they remembered, trying to make listeners understand nuance. The boy was complicating his map with each passing minute, which suggested he was remembering actual mine placements, not inventing convenient lies. But there was something else Jamie noticed. Something that made the decision possible rather than suicidal. When the boy drew his map, he included his own position. He marked the farmhouse he'd emerged from. And between that farmhouse and British lines, he'd drawn a path. No mine symbols along it. A safe corridor through the minefield. That detail changed everything. If the boy was leading them into ambush, why show a safe path back? Why give them escape route? Deception would involve directing them forward into kill zones, not showing them how to retreat safely. Jamie stared at the mud map for long seconds. The ethical weight of what he was considering grew heavier with each moment. He wasn't just deciding whether to trust enemy intelligence. He was gambling 15 British lives on a teenager's mud drawing. If the map was deception, if German machine guns were waiting in prepared positions, Jamie would lead his entire patrol into massacre. But if the map was accurate, if those X marks showed real mines, then ignoring this intelligence meant stepping on buried explosives that would kill them just as certainly as ambush fire. The moral calculation was simple and horrible. Trust and possibly die. Don't trust and probably die. There was no safe choice. There was only the choice that gave them the best odds of reaching tomorrow. On the afternoon of March 27th, Jamie's internal debate became irrelevant. Time made the decision for him. His patrol's advanced timeline required movement in 6 minutes. Waiting for mine verification teams meant missing the objective entirely, and radio reports indicated German counterattacks were forming in the sector. Standing still meant becoming targets. Jamie looked at the boy, at the map, at his 15 soldiers waiting for orders. Then he made a decision that would change everything. "MacLeod, bind the prisoner. He's coming with us. We're going to follow his map exactly, and if it's wrong, he's walking point." The boy's name, Jamie learned through halting translation, was Klaus Zimmermann, 17 years old, from Hamburg, conscripted into Wehrmacht Engineering Corps 6 weeks ago, trained for 3 weeks, deployed to Rhine defences 2 weeks ago, abandoned by his unit yesterday when British advance overwhelmed their position. Klaus had helped plant the minefield 2 days ago. 47 Teller mines buried in systematic pattern across the field Jamie's patrol needed to cross. His engineering sergeant had documented locations carefully, standard protocol, but the documentation had been lost when the unit scattered. Klaus remembered the pattern because he'd been the one digging most of the holes. His hands still had blisters. Jamie studied Klaus as the boy spoke, trying to assess truth from deception. Everything Klaus said aligned with tactical reality. German engineering units had been mining defensive positions throughout the Rhine sector. Systematic patterns were standard doctrine. Documentation lost during retreat chaos was entirely plausible. But plausibility didn't guarantee honesty. Skilled liars used plausibility. They wove truth and deception together seamlessly. Jamie made his decision. MacLeod, take point with the prisoner. He's going to walk us through. If he's lying, he dies first. If he's telling truth, we all survive. Either way, he's motivated to be accurate. Klaus's eyes widened when the translation reached him. Walking point meant leading, first across the minefield, first to die if the map was wrong. It was brutal psychology, but effective. No one led people into mines they'd personally walk over first. The patrol formed up. Klaus at front with MacLeod's rifle pressed against his back. Jamie directly behind, watching both the ground and the prisoner. 13 soldiers following in single file, each man stepping exactly where the man ahead had stepped. Standard mine crossing protocol, except they were following a German teenager instead of mine detectors. Klaus began moving. He walked slowly, deliberately, checking landmarks against mental map. 15 yards forward, then angle northeast. 20 yards, stop, redirect slightly west. Each course correction matched features in the mud map he'd drawn. A destroyed fence post, a shell crater, a dead tree. Jamie watched the ground as they moved. His mining knowledge screamed warnings with every step. The soil here showed disturbance. Drainage patterns were wrong. Grass grew irregularly. Every indicator suggested mines beneath them. But Klaus walked confidently, choosing paths that avoided the most suspicious areas, following routes that matched what Jamie's instincts said might be safe corridors. At 40 yards, Klaus stopped completely. He pointed right, to a section of ground that looked identical to everything else. "Mine," he said in accented English. "Dry meter." 3 meters. MacLeod looked at Jamie. "Could be bluffing. Making us think he's legitimate before leading us into the kill zone." "Could be." Jamie studied the ground Klaus indicated. It did look slightly wrong. Subtle depression. Grass pattern different. Or he's actually warning us about mines he knows are there because he buried them. They redirected left, following Klaus's guidance. 10 yards further, Klaus stopped again. Pointed to seemingly random patch of ground. "Mine. 2 Meter. 2 meters. The pattern continued. Klaus leading, stopping, redirecting, warning about specific locations with precision that felt either perfectly rehearsed or genuinely remembered. Each warning matched Jamie's ground-reading instincts. Each redirection took them through areas that looked marginally safer. At 100 yards, Klaus paused longer. He was sweating despite cold weather. His hands shook. He looked back at Jamie with expressions somewhere between terror and exhaustion. Then he pointed straight ahead. "Drei Minen. Sehr nahe zusammen." 3 mines. Very close together. Jamie moved forward, studying the ground Klaus indicated. There. Subtle disturbances. 3 slight depressions forming rough triangle. Exactly where Klaus said they'd be. Exactly matching mine placement doctrine for creating overlapping kill zones. If Klaus was lying, if this was elaborate deception, it was the most sophisticated mine-based ambush Jamie had ever encountered. More likely, Klaus was a terrified 17-year-old trying to survive by proving his value to captors through accurate intelligence. They navigated around the 3-mine cluster, following Klaus's indicated safe path. The ground felt wrong with every step, Jamie's instincts screaming that they were walking through death, but Klaus kept moving with confidence that suggested memory rather than guesswork. At 150 yards, Klaus stopped and turned to Jamie. His face showed exhaustion, fear, and something else. Relief. He gestured to the ground around them, then to the cleared area ahead. "Keine Minen mehr." "Safe." No more mines. Safe. Jamie looked at his patrol. 15 British soldiers standing unharmed in the middle of what Klaus claimed was cleared ground. Behind them, a minefield they'd just navigated, using nothing but a German teenager's memory and mud map. Ahead, open ground that Klaus said was unmined. MacLeod stepped forward carefully, testing the ground. He walked 20 yards, stopped, turned back. Ground feels different here, Corp. Undisturbed. If there's mines ahead, they're better hidden than anything I've ever seen. Jamie made a decision. Parker, you're fastest. Run ahead, 50 yards. Zigzag pattern. If you make it, the ground's clear. Private Parker looked at Jamie like he'd been ordered to commit suicide. Corp, if there's mines, one man dies instead of 16, and you're lightest, which means best chance of not triggering pressure plates. Jamie's voice was cold, tactical, the mathematics of survival. Run! Parker ran. He zigzagged across 50 yards of open ground, his boots pounding earth, each step potentially his last. 15 British soldiers and 1 German teenager watched in silence, waiting for explosion that never came. Parker reached 50 yards, stopped, turned, waved. Clear ground. Jamie looked at Klaus. The boy was crying. Not from fear anymore. From relief. He'd told truth. Led enemies through mines he'd planted. Saved lives of soldiers who'd captured him. And in doing so, probably guaranteed his own survival as valuable prisoner rather than expendable POW. At 15:47 hours, on March 27, 1945, Jamie's patrol reached their objective position without casualties. 15 British soldiers alive because a 17-year-old German conscript had drawn a map in the mud and proven it accurate by walking point through his own minefield. The patrol established defensive position and radioed success to command. Battalion headquarters responded with acknowledgement and new orders. Secure prisoner for intelligence debriefing. Document minefield locations. Prepare for follow-on forces to advance through secured corridor. Jamie sat with Klaus in a shell crater, sharing water and rations while waiting for follow-on units to arrive. The boy ate mechanically, still shaking from exhaustion and shock. Through halting translation, Jamie learned Klaus's story. Conscripted in January. Too young for Wehrmacht standards, but Germany was desperate. Given 3 weeks training that focused on digging, mine placement, and retreat procedures. Deployed to Rhine without ever firing rifle in combat. Ordered to help plant defensive mines 2 days ago. Abandoned when British advance overran position yesterday. Spent night alone in destroyed farmhouse, listening to artillery, too afraid to run toward German lines because deserters were executed, too afraid to stay because British were coming. When Jamie's patrol appeared, Klaus made a choice. Surrender and hope for mercy. Offer intelligence in exchange for survival. Prove value by helping enemies avoid mines his engineering unit had planted. Why help us? Jamie asked through the translator. You could have stayed hidden. Let us walk into the mines. Killed British soldiers. Klaus looked at Jamie with eyes too old for 17. I did not want to plant the mines. My sergeant said we were protecting Germany. But those mines kill anyone. German, British, doesn't matter. Just explosions waiting for feet. He paused. I'm tired of war. I'm tired of killing. You captured me. I surrendered. I don't want more death. Jamie studied the boy. 17 years old. Conscripted into war he didn't believe in. Forced to plant weapons he knew would kill indiscriminately. Then choosing to betray his own side's defences because he was tired of killing. It wasn't heroism. It wasn't ideology. It was simple exhaustion. A child who wanted war to end. At 16:23 hours, British reinforcements arrived. A full platoon with mine-clearing teams, intelligence officers, and proper prisoner processing personnel. An intelligence captain named Wesley approached Jamie, examined Klaus, studied the mud map that Jamie had carefully preserved. The prisoner provided tactical intelligence. Yes, sir. Minefield locations. Led us through safely. Every warning was accurate. Wesley studied Klaus with expression Jamie couldn't quite read. That's valuable intelligence. Potentially saved multiple casualties. However, it's also enemy intelligence accepted in active combat zone without verification. You violated protocol, Corporal. Jamie stiffened. Sir, we had 8 minutes to move forward or miss objective. Verification would have taken hours we didn't have. I understand the tactical calculation. Wesley gestured to the minefield behind them. Mine clearance teams will need to verify everything. If the prisoner was lying, if there's mines he didn't mark, we'll have casualties. That will be your responsibility. Yes, sir. Wesley turned to Klaus. The prisoner will be transferred to rear echelon for proper interrogation. If his intelligence proves accurate, he'll receive appropriate consideration. If not... Wesley didn't finish the sentence. Jamie watched as MPs took Klaus away. The boy looked back once, his expression uncertain, caught between hope and fear. He'd saved British lives, but he'd also betrayed his own military, violated his oath, collaborated with enemy forces. Whether that made him hero or traitor depended entirely on who was judging. March 29th, 1945, 0900 hours. The debriefing room at British Second Army headquarters was austere. One table, 2 chairs, and Captain Wesley sitting across from Jamie with a report containing the Klaus Zimmermann incident. Wesley's face was carefully neutral as he opened the folder. Mine clearance teams have completed verification of the field your patrol crossed. They've confirmed 47 teller mines buried in the locations the German prisoner indicated. Every single mine placement matches his map. No additional mines were found in the corridor he led you through. Jamie exhaled slowly. Validation. Klaus had told truth. Saved 15 British lives through accurate intelligence and personal risk. However, Wesley continued, accepting unverified enemy intelligence in combat zones remains protocol violation. You gambled patrol lives on teenagers mud drawing without proper authorization. If you'd been wrong, if the prisoner had been lying, your entire patrol would have walked into prepared ambush. Yes, sir, but we weren't wrong and my patrol is alive. This time, Wesley closed the folder. You made tactical decision that succeeded, but success doesn't justify methodology. Rules exist to prevent soldiers from making individual judgments that compromise larger operations. What if every patrol leader started accepting enemy intelligence without verification? What if German deception operations exploited exactly this kind of unauthorized trust? Jamie met Wesley's eyes. Sir, with respect, sometimes rules don't account for reality. We had minutes to move forward. The ground showed mine indicators. The prisoner's information aligned with everything my engineering knowledge suggested. Not accepting his intelligence would have meant either abandoning objective or stepping on mines blind. Perhaps. Wesley stood. The prisoner's intelligence has been valuable. Beyond your immediate patrol, his mine maps have enabled safe passage for 3 follow-on units. Approximately 70 British soldiers have crossed that field safely using corridors he identified. That's significant tactical advantage. Jamie felt something uncoil in his chest. Vindication. Klaus's maps had saved more than just Jamie's patrol. They'd opened an entire corridor through German defensive positions. However, Wesley continued, the prisoner's status is complicated. He's 17, technically a child soldier under some interpretations. He collaborated with enemy forces willingly. He betrayed German military positions. If word reaches Wehrmacht, he could be tried for treason. If word reaches German civilians post-war, he could face persecution as collaborator. He saved British lives, sir. He did, but he also violated his oath to Germany, regardless of how unwillingly that oath was given. Wesley pulled out transfer orders. The prisoner is being moved to specialized intelligence facility for extended debriefing. His knowledge of German defensive engineering could be valuable for final push into Germany. After that, he'll be processed as normal POW. What happens to him after the war, sir? Wesley's expression softened slightly. That depends on many factors. His age, his willingness to cooperate with Allied occupation, whether German authorities prosecute collaborators post-surrender. I can't predict his future. But I can tell you that 70 British soldiers are alive because you chose to trust him. That matters, even if officially we can't acknowledge it. Jamie nodded slowly. And my violation of protocol? Officially, you're being reprimanded for accepting unverified enemy intelligence. It's on your record. Promotion prospects are limited. Wesley paused. Unofficially, Battalion Commander is recommending you for commendation for tactical initiative that enabled successful objective capture without casualties. Those recommendations contradict, so they'll both disappear into paperwork that never reaches formal recognition. I understand, sir. Wesley moved toward the door, then turned back. Corporal Bennett, that German boy you trusted. He'll spend the rest of his life wondering if he was traitor or hero for drawing that map. Can you live knowing you made him choose between his oath and his conscience? Jamie thought about Klaus. 17 years old, conscripted into war, forced to plant mines. Then choosing to betray those mines because he was tired of killing. A boy who made the hardest choice a soldier faces, following orders or following humanity. I can live with it, sir, because 70 men are walking around who wouldn't be if he'd followed his orders. Whatever that makes him, whatever that makes me, it's better than 70 families receiving death notifications. Wesley nodded once and left. Jamie Bennett spent the rest of the war with the 15th Scottish Division, leading patrols through the final advance into Germany. He never saw Klaus Zimmermann again. After the war, Jamie returned to Yorkshire, worked at Kellingley Colliery alongside his father, married, raised 4 daughters, and died in 1994 at the age of 71. Klaus Zimmermann survived the war. He was processed as POW, held until 1947, then repatriated to Hamburg. He faced questions about collaboration, but was never formally charged due to age and circumstances of conscription. He worked as civil engineer in West Germany, married, raised 2 sons, and died in 2003 at the age of 75. He never spoke publicly about the map he drew in March 1945. In the decades that followed, military historians occasionally noted the efficient mine clearance during Rhine advance operations. Some attributed it to improved detection equipment. Others credited better intelligence coordination. The truth remained classified in a mud map, in a teenager's memory that saved 70 British soldiers from walking into death. If this story moved you, subscribe for more untold tales of World War II's unlikely heroes. Because sometimes the most important battles are fought not with weapons, but with the courage to trust an enemy who's tired of killing. Jamie Bennett never fired a shot during the Klaus Zimmermann incident. But on one March afternoon near Wiesel, he fought the most important battle of his life, armed with nothing but ground-reading skills, a teenager's mud map, and the willingness to gamble 15 lives on trusting a captured child. In the end, war isn't always won by those who follow protocol. Sometimes it's won by those who understand when to trust the enemy.